All right, it looks like a go. How you doing? Welcome. I am Professor Cardworthy, the financial explainer. We're talking about all things financial on this program, and we look at things both from a consumer angle as well as a business angle. We've helped millions of consumers get the best out of their financial products and how to compare them and so on and so forth. And on the business side, helping banks particularly become very competitive with each other, as well as in the credit card market and some of the other financial products markets, and of course also to be consumer sensitive. And so we cover kind of like all the financial areas. My expertise for 30 years is mostly in payments, particularly in credit, debit, and prepaid cards. But we're going to cover all areas, not just borrowing, but also savings, investing, so on and so forth. But let's get right to it. Our lesson today is Discover, Visa, Squashed. You probably wonder, well, what the heck are we talking about here with a Visa card and a Discover card, and how that was actually squashed. It's a long story, but I'm going to shorten it up as much as possible to you. There's a lot more on the story that's in the blog and on the podcast that I'm going to share with you, but I'm going to go through this and give you we're going to start with just a quick overview of the payments industry, and I'm going to slide my little whiteboard over here. Hope you can see that. Anyway, the important thing is you know most of this, but I'm just going to explain. This is the payments industry. You know, in the United States, now I'm talking about the United States, there are four major brands of general purpose credit cards. They're issued by thousands of issuers, banks, and so forth and so on. And there are four major brands. There's Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. And the four major products issued by most of these is credit, debit, charge, and prepaid. And if you're not familiar with a charge card, that is a combination of a debit and a credit card. It's where it gives you 30, maybe 60 days to pay it off in full. It's a kind of a short-term credit card. And of course, prepaid cards, a very explosive area, gift cards, so on, that you find in the business. And of these, the four networks, as they're called in the industry, Visa has about a 53% share, MasterCard about 23%, American Express 20%, and Discover has a 4%. Now, the difference between the four is that Visa and MasterCard are networks only. They're payment systems. They do not directly issue cards to anybody. They're all through franchises, licensees, whatever you want to call them. They're issued through banks, financial institutions, and there's literally thousands of them. I mean, I don't know the exact number anymore. I remember at one time it was 5,000. I think it's like 15,000. I don't know what the number is, but that's how their cards are issued. They're a network only. Now, American Express and Discover are different. They're both a network and an issuer. They're a network just like Visa, MasterCard, but most of their cards are issued from themselves. American Express does have some partnerships with banks that will issue their cards for them, but Discover, no, that's largely they do both, being a network and an issuer in the United States. And the other thing, always the big difference between them is the acceptance. And that's a question that you get a lot. Visa and MasterCard are universally accepted in the United States. I mean, almost every merchant will take a Visa or MasterCard. Discover, a little bit less. It's still substantial, but not to the level of Visa and MasterCard acceptance. And of course, Discover lingers behind all those. They still have pretty good acceptance. I mean, a lot more than they had before. But the whole story here is about Visa and Discover. Now, this is going back a while. This is going back to the year 1992. But I want to share this experience with you because I was personally involved in it. And we could have had a Visa card issued by a Discover-owned institution. And this is what happened. It was Discover had purchased a financial institution in Utah called Mountain West Financial. And under the laws at that time, I mean, whatever, if the bank had an agreement, let's say with Visa to issue a card, then that would, if they were acquired, then those rights would all pass right through. So Discover bought this bank and they were going to issue a Visa card. Well, Visa would not have approved that under normal circumstances. They wouldn't have approved it anyway because it's a direct competitor issuing one of their products. So it ended up, it almost pulled off. I mean, Discover, it wasn't actually Discover's Dean Witter at that time. I mean, they've gone through their different formations, but just for purposes of this conversation, I'll just refer to them as Discover. But Discover had already printed up all these solicitations and applications. They were ready to go with this thing, and they just had to get the paperwork filed through Visa. Well, Visa happened, some clerk noticed on the paperwork, and they put two and two together. Wait, this is actually owned by Discover, and so Visa blocked it right away. I mean, they weren't going to allow something like that to happen. So what happened? Well, it ended up in a court battle, and Discover sued Visa for $2 billion as an antitrust lawsuit asserting that Visa was using its market power to keep out their product, and they felt that the product they were going to offer would bring real competition to the marketplace. So it ended up in a big trial, and right off the chute, Visa calls me because they know I've done all this research about competition, collected all this data from banks all across the country for many years, and they thought if there's anybody that can evaluate their product and say what it actually would do in the marketplace, that would be me. So they gave me three options. It was like door number one, door number two, door number three. Door number one was to come in as a highly paid expert witness. Number two was to come in as an expert witness for expenses only. And then number three is, we'll subpoena you and make you testify. So I took door number two, and the reason I did that is because Discover and Visa were both clients of mine. They were subscribers to our services where we collect information from the banks and so forth. And I didn't want to alienate either one of them. But anyway, what happened was it came time for me to be deposed by the Discover attorneys. Well, when they had gotten wind, of course, that I was going to testify for Visa. And so they were very rattled, and they knew my testimony would be quite compelling because of all the credibility I had built up over the years. And so they sent the top lawyer from the top law firm. I don't normally put out names on the pod and the YouTube cast, but it was Kirkland & Ellis, which happens to be, like I say, among the very top. They sent out their top attorney to depose me, and they were looking for anything possible to discredit my testimony in any way. And it was a grueling 8 hours. I had been in one other deposition involving a workman's comp claim years ago, and it was nothing. But this was grueling. I mean, talking about my mother, I mean, everything, turning so and so on. And I did not have a college diploma. I still don't. And he tried to play off of that a little bit, but it's still, I just, stood my ground, and I explained about their product, that it really wasn't going to be that competitive in the marketplace and so on and so forth. But what he didn't anticipate was near the end of the testimony or the deposition, those last 2 hours, I was pretty passionate about it because I really, really just dismantled all their arguments about whether or not they were bringing a competitive product to the marketplace. And I think he sensed that passion. In fact, the Visa attorneys kind of like, whoa, okay, well, this is our guy, I guess. So anyway, so it ended up after the deposition, several months went, then we had the trial in Salt Lake City. And in Salt Lake City, the trial was held. It was mostly a Mormon jury, as you could imagine. And Discover, incidentally, had a very large presence there. They had a large processing center and so on. So it was held in Salt Lake City, and of course that's where the institution, that's why it was filed there, because of the institution that they had purchased. So anyway, this was a $2 billion, they were seeking $2 billion in damages. So this was a big deal, very big deal. And Visa brought all of its attorneys. It took up a whole floor in a hotel room and so on. But anyway, Discover had put on their 7 witnesses, and they were all highly paid experts. They had degrees out to who know what, and the jury was asleep the whole time. I mean, it was absolutely. This is, like I say, there's some funny parts of this. They were asleep, and then they got to the last witness, and then I would be up. Visa was going to call me as their first witness out of 7 to go against them, and he had made some reference to what I heard as intergalactic economics. And so when it came time for me to get on take the stand, I explained to everybody that, I'm here not to talk about intergalactic, economics. And in fact, everybody was laughing. Even the judge, I think, laughed, but the jury and all the lawyers. And I was just here to tell the truth and share, my knowledge and so on. And it kind of an interesting thing, the jury being Mormon, I was asked by the Visa attorneys about some personal questions, and I told them I had 5 children, and I gave a little surprise testimony, and I told them I had just found out that morning that my wife was pregnant with our 6th child. So they kind of looked at each other, and then I had done some voluntary missionary work at a young age, and they thought they were just kind of putting maybe some things together. Maybe he's like one of us or something, but I'm not Mormon, so that didn't happen. But anyway, I did bond with them very quickly, and I was able to communicate with them because when I got the exhibits out, I explained things in very simple terms. I mean, here's all the banks in Utah, and here's what they charge, and all the different combinations of things they have, and then went from there to the national market and showed the same kind of thing. And here's this product, and it's a middling. In other words, it's just right in the middle of the marketplace. It's not going to do anything. It's just that at that time, Discover's acceptance was less than 1 million. They didn't have like 500,000 merchants in the country taking their card, whereas, of course, Visa and MasterCard were up in the millions. So it would allow them to, in a sense, in an indirect way, tap into that network and benefit from it. It took Visa, MasterCard 40 years to build that network. And Discover, they were, whatever that was, like 7, it was less than 10 years they had invested. But they had to build a network, it just wasn't that big. So anyway, the testimony was kind of interesting. I also pointed out something about the Discover card, which really surprised everyone. This was on the second day of testimony. This was actually kind of overwhelming because, the media pool was out there. You got these attorneys. They had attorneys in there from American Express. Everybody that was in the business was in there. They weren't involved in the trial, but they were there to observe and learn because there was a lot of inside information that was testified to on both sides. So, but I explained how Discover, while it was no fee, most of their products, they used an interest calculation method called the 2-cycle average daily balance method. It's complicated. We can talk about it another time, but essentially, in the worst case, consumers end up paying twice as much interest as they would on a traditional Visa and MasterCard or the way they were priced at that time. So the whole testimony, in the newspapers that were covering the story, I was on the stand for 2 days. They said I had them on the edge of their seats, kind of making me feel good. And I think the judge liked it too, and I found out about that. But what happened is, again, trying to shorten this up, Visa finished with its witnesses, and of course it went to the jury, and the jury found for Discover. And again, I think that was pretty obvious as to why, because they had the influence there. But the judge made the comment, accepted the verdict, but he had put in his comments that he considered setting that verdict aside based on my testimony. He found it so compelling that, that it just made sense. And so that rarely happens in a federal case of that size and $2 billion, so I really felt good about that. So what happened is, of course, Discover won the case there, and it went to appeals court, and it was overturned unanimously by the appeals court, and then Discover took it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and I suppose because of its track record, they didn't want to take the case, so Visa won. So in a way, I kind of, maybe saved them $2 billion. At least I did a part of that, but not all of it. But it was an enjoyable experience, but that's why, I mean, to this day, you don't see a Visa or Discover card. It's not, they put the caboose to that back then, and you don't see it today. And Discover, of course, is mostly a domestic card. I mean, they do have their Diners Club International, which is more useful overseas than it is in the United States. But nonetheless, it was a great experience. I kept trying to tune out all this heady stuff because I just, country boy on the stand here, and I'm breaking it down for them and giving them the information they needed. And I would just kind of, if I drifted off, I would think about what it was like to fish in Utah. And that was my only distraction. The only thing is, to this day, I never got to take my sons fishing to Utah. But anyway, there's not much personal advice in this. I mean, it's just more of a history lesson. And maybe you didn't realize how the business operates. Like I say, sometimes people get confused. In fact, brands are not even that meaningful anymore. You get cards now that don't even necessarily even show the brand on the front of the card. And so it can be a little confusing that way. But I hope I made some sense. And if you had any misconceptions about how their business works, that's fine. So anyway, that's all the time for today. I really, truly enjoy the fact that you took the time out to listen. Again, there's more information, cardworthy.com, that's the place to go. We have the podcast. We have the blog, which is called Professor Cardworthy's Corner, where all the stories are posted. And both of them, of course, are much more in depth than what we share here on the YouTube channel. And I want to encourage you to become a friend of Cardworthy. We have invested a lot, not just in this program, but in the other projects that we've been working on for the last 18 months. And we do need some help. So if you can do that, it's not a huge amount of money we're trying to raise, but it's enough to kind of get this stabilized, and then we can make this more of a produced. I mean, this right now is just a what you see, what you get, one shot, no edit kind of program. We'll get back to what we were doing in 2007 with Cardworthy, where it was actually produced, and we can do all kinds of video things. So we need the extra help to put that in place. So we would appreciate any donations. If you make a business donation, of course, large, considerable one, that's nice. We will be able to give you some free services from other services that we offer. It'll all work out. And of course, everybody who contributes gets the Friend of Cardworthy newsletter that comes out every month. And so we appreciate your help. And if you can really, truly help us out on, and you can go, I was going to mention, the GoFundMe page. We have a GoFundMe as part of the fundraising. It's just, you search Cardworthy, Professor Cardworthy, it'll pop right up. And then you can go in, and there's a lot of information in the post there, not only about myself, but what we've been doing for the last 30 years, and just kind of a history, and then why we need to raise some money. So if you can do that, it's much appreciated. Again, I hope you enjoyed today, and keep coming back. I mean, it's always the question, are you cardworthy? If you are, great. If not, keep coming back, and all of my students will eventually be cardworthy. And I hope you maybe learned something, and hopefully maybe even put a little smile on your face. So that's it. Have a great day.